Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing data cleaning. We have a massive sets of data coming from my trip. We have these Indian cities, 6 of them. We're going to merge them, convert them into pandas data frame, and then investigate what are the missing values, what are the features that we need to standardize, do some sort of cleanup, and then wrap it up. All right, so here we first start by importing all the necessary libraries. OS is a native library, you don't have to install it. Pandas, if you don't have, you need to install it and import it. TKDM, you don't really need this. I'm installing it because I'm showing some sort of progress when I'm reading the file. If it's not a native library, so if you want to use it, you have to import it. And then time, I'm using it to make the process sleep for half a second so that it shows the progress properly. So we have the directory. All the files that I showed you are stored under a directory called India. And then here I'm listing all the files and creating a list out of those files. Okay, ignore this full pass for now. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and delete it. All right, and then I'm initializing an empty dictionary. This is going to hold our city names and their corresponding data frames. Okay, so here we're going to loop through our list of files, okay, and then create a data frame for each city. So how we're going to do that is we first iterate through the list, and then we use os-path.join method to join the file name and the directory name so that we can read it as a CSV, and this will create a data frame. Okay, the data frame then is created with the capitalized version of the city names. Here, the city names, as you can see, are all small letter. So what I'm doing is I'm splitting them on the dot and keeping only the name and capitalizing it so that it looks nicer. Okay, all right, so let me just run this block. Done. So now what we've done is we've loaded all our files into separate data frames and we have uploaded them in our datasets dictionary. The key being our city names and the value being the data frame. So we can come here and see what our datasets look like, the dictionary. See, you can see here Hyderabad, for example, is a key for the following data frame. Another thing we can do is we can come here and do index it by the key. There you go. So this is what our datasets look like. But then now we have multiple datasets, right? 6 separate datasets. In order to make our work a lot more easier, what we're going to do is we're going to merge all of them or concatenate them. We're going to concatenate them not horizontally but vertically, stacking one on top of the other so that they can share, because all of them share at the end of the day the city name, hotel name, rating, all the columns they share. So we just stack them one on top of the other. In order to do that, we use the pandas concat method. Pandas concat method takes dictionary, passing datasets. So now this is what our data currently looks like. So, but what we want is we want a column called cities and then reset the index. So in order to do that, we reset our index and then we change level 0 into city. Okay, we will rename level 0 into city, because once we reset this, let me just show you again. The city name is named as level 0, so we rename it. Rename function takes a dictionary, level 0, rename it to city. Yeah. Now we have the data frame we want. We have 580 rows, 11 columns. This is all the cities combined together. So the data importation part is completed. The next step would be to see what what our sample looks like, and then we will go through the data cleaning process. Okay. So now most people, after importing the data, after creating a data frame, they do head, just to have an idea of what our data looks like. Head or tail. You can put number of rows you want to see by putting the number here. Works for head as well. Okay, there are other methods that you can use. For example, you can use info, which will give you the column names, null counts, non-null counts, data types. We will explore info a little bit in depth later on, but for now let's just do the sample, because head and tail will show us only consecutive rows, but sample will do a random sampling and show us what the data looks like. So let's do a sample of 10. So here we're able to see different cities and different data values, right? Okay, so now from here we understand that there are some missing values. Price, for example, has comma in most of the values. Distance has some non-values. Some of the distance are given in meters and some are in kilometers. So we'll have to standardize this. Tax has comma in some of the values, and then none as well. So none is missing value. So we'll have to address all of this before we proceed into further data manipulation, such as, for example, to do exploratory data analysis, we'll have to clean the data first. And in this video, obviously, we'll not go in depth into data analysis, but we will do a proper job of handling missing values, standardization, and more. So the first step to handle missing value is just to know how many of them are there. So to do that, we use isNA method, and then we sum them to see by column. All right. So once we run this, we see that nearest landmark and distance to landmark have 290 missing values. Tax has 176, and star rating has 95. So we'll have to address, how to handle these values. Let's go ahead and do that. Tax. For tax, we cannot guess tax values. Then for this scenario, I choose to fill it with 0 because that seems like the right thing to do. It also signifies that, the tax value hasn't been provided. Distance to landmark. If there is no distance given to a certain landmark, again, we cannot use averaging technique or any other imputation technique. Instead, we will signify that that value hasn't been given by replacing all the missing values with -1. For star rating, we are replacing all the missing values for star ratings with 0. Because if a hotel doesn't have a star rating, we know that there are certain hotels in some cities that doesn't have international star ratings. So in this case, we can represent them with 0. So I'm replacing all the missing values with 0. Nearest landmark, again, if there is no nearest landmark, instead of showing NA or none, we just show none. You can choose to replace it with whatever you want. I just choose to replace it with none in this case. So this way, we're handling our missing values. It's quite easy. There are other techniques that you can use to handle missing values, but that depends on the kind of data frame you're working with. For my current data frame, this I think suits better. So once we run this blog, let's go back and check to see if our number of NAs have decreased, and indeed they decreased properly. Okay, so we only have 1, 2, 3 missing values. Okay, those honestly are not something to worry about because the majority of the missing values we've addressed already. So next step is, as I said earlier, is to investigate what our data types look like and whether they make sense or not. So to do that, we just use the info method. Data.info shows, for example, tax as object, but we know for a fact that tax should be a type that's either int or float. Okay, we'll have to address that. Price is also an object. Price should be a numeric value. Distance should be a numeric value. What else? Ratings are float. That's correct. Star ratings float as well. That's correct. So okay, so we'll address the nearest value, the distance, price, and tax. And distance gets a bit trickier, but I'll tell you how to handle that as well. It's part of the standardization process. So here, let's handle first, as we saw earlier, distance is given and some of them are in meters, some in kilometer. So we'll have to standardize into 1 unit. So for here, we've chosen to standardize to kilometers. So that means every meter value has to be divided by 1,000 because 1 kilometer is 1,000 meter. And we'll have to remove M and KM as well from the distance to landmark columns. So the way to do that is first we have to define a variable called meter rows. You can call yours in any way you want. We are checking for a string in each cell that contains M, and then once we find that means those values are given in meter. The next step would be to replace M with empty, and then we convert that value into a float, and then we divide it by 1,000, which will give us the kilometer value. So in order to do that, we're using the pandas block function. It takes meter rows, which is what we found here, all the values or all the values that are given in meter in the distance to landmark column, and we're replacing meter with empty with no string, which makes it easier for us to convert to typecast string value into float. Once we do that, we divide by 1,000, converting it into a kilometer. Okay, so we handle the meter part. Next, we'll handle the kilometer part. Again, KM has to be replaced. Once we do that here, because we're not converting the type, we are the unit, we're not going to be dividing by 1,000, but the process is the same. We take the distance, all the values that include a kilometer, we replace them with empty, and then we convert that type into float. Okay, so here we handled the distance part. The next is price. Price, as we saw, has comma. Comma has to be replaced with empty again, and we convert it into float. Another one is tax. Tax, again, the same. Some of the tax values we've seen earlier had commas. We're removing the comma and converting the type into float. So let's run this block. Now let's go back and run. Here, as you can see, we have only 3 float values, and the rest of them are objects. So let's run this again. This should change significantly. Now we have more float values and lesser object values. So this is one way to do data cleaning. It's very easy, streamlined. very, very key to observe the units, as well as observing, the added characters like commas and unit names, right? So this is the short video that I prepared for today to show some data cleaning processes. Next time I'll be creating a much more in-depth video about exploratory data analysis, average price per city for the same data, and some distribution charts that shows how star ratings are distributed across different Indian cities. This data is very interesting actually, so I will leave a link for the data so you guys can download it and play with it if you want. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. Thank you.